I'm Victoria.
And I'm Wes.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about theater history.
So, Victoria, do you listen to podcasts or have you ever recorded one?
So, I've actually never been super into podcasts. This might sound dumb, but I didn't really realize how big they'd become until about 2 to 3 years ago. In February of 2020, I was on a bus ride to KCACTF, the theater festival, with my teacher and classmates from the school I was at, Coastal Carolina Community College. And there were a lot of D&D fans on this bus, including my teacher. And he was driving, so he decided to play a D&D podcast for us all to listen to. And everybody got super invested, and it was crazy. Like, I had never really heard a podcast before, and I didn't really stick with listening to them. I think that was probably the one and only one I've ever fully listened to. But it was really cool. Until that moment, I don't think I had realized how big they'd become from that and watching Only Murders in the Building. When I started watching that, I was like, oh, wow, like, podcasts have become a really big thing, and I thought it was really cool. I have personally never recorded one, but I think I might want to in the future. I think this class has really made me interested in podcasts. I have a few interests that I think might be good for them, like Harry Potter and musical theater and traveling. So it might be cool to make one in the future. What about you? Do you listen to podcasts, or have you ever recorded one?
I do listen to podcasts. I listen to one called Chuckle Sandwich, which is like a normal talking podcast with YouTubers Ted Navision and one named Schlatt. And I occasionally listen to one called Very Really Good by Curtis Connor, and they're both like just regular talking about stuff podcasts, I guess. But my favorite podcasts are fictional, and one's called The Magnus Archives, which is a drama horror, and it's terrifying, but I love it. And the other one is a D&D podcast called Dimension 20, and it's with the cast of College Humor, and it's hilarious, and my favorite thing, right now at least. But I've not ever recorded a podcast as of this moment when I am recording a podcast. But other than this, no, I have not. So, moving away from podcasting for a bit, have you ever studied theater history before? And if you have, what did you enjoy about it? What was, like, challenging and stuff?
I have. When I was at Coastal, I took Theater History 1 and 2 and a Literature of Drama class that got a little bit into theater history. And it was just mainly with, like, the variety of plays that we read. Personally, I think I enjoyed Theater History 2 more than Theater History 1, mainly because the text that we were reading was a lot easier to understand. We didn't get a lot of translations, like the one Elizabeth gave us for the Bacchae. That really helped me to understand it. And I feel like the material that we covered in Theater History 2 was a little bit more modern. Like, we had a project towards the end of the semester where we got a little bit into musical theater, and so we had to choose a musical from a list that our teacher provided us, and it was like one of the most influential shows in the history of musicals. And Cats is my guilty pleasure. So I chose that, and I had the best time creating this presentation on Cats and Andrew Lloyd Webber. But the most challenging part for me was probably in Theater History 1 when we started studying Asian theater. I really enjoyed, like, what we were learning, but the names and everything were really hard to keep up with and absorb. So going into the specifics of kabuki and bunraku and no theater was not the most fun for me.
Well, that sounds really difficult. I'm stuck on you talking about Cats, though. That's a terrifying musical.
Oh, I love it so much. But what about you? Have you studied theater history before? And if you have, what did you enjoy about it? Or what did you find challenging?
I've not ever really studied theater history before. I took performance in high school, and in my senior year, we finally looked into some older Greek plays, but I don't really remember it. And I mean, we did a show about the original Medea, and that was pretty fun, but that's literally the only thing I know. That's the only thing I know about theater history. So, that's my story. What is a time period in history, like not related to theater, or it could be if you wanted, that you want to know more about?
So personally, I wish I knew more about the golden age of musical theater, because when I was younger, I used to say, oh, I hate golden age shows, like they're just old and they're not even that good and the music's boring. But as I got older and I started getting more familiar with the shows, and I did a few in high school and at my last school, I really started to enjoy them and understand them more. So I would definitely like to know a lot more about that time period since I spent so much time convincing myself when I was younger that I didn't like it. I really hate that I did that.
Oh, that's really unfortunate. I hope you get to learn more about it.
Me too.
Mm.
But what about you? What is a time period in history, related to theater or not, that you wish you knew more about?
I have always been fairly curious about the Middle Ages because whenever I think of it, I always think of like Ireland and the potato famine, and I'm not even sure that that's in the same time period. It's probably not. But like, I don't think I've always ever thought about what the rest of the world was doing during the Middle Ages, and I know the Renaissance was right after it, but the people who lived through the Middle Ages must have had something that felt like the Renaissance to them. Like, they didn't know they were in a dark age, you know? Like, what was something cool that happened to them at that time?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So what does theater history have to do with you? What does it have to do with you?
Okay, so I think theater history has a lot to do with me. I think it has a lot to do with you. I think it has a lot to do with anybody that is majoring in theater or pursuing theater. Because for us to really appreciate our facilities and equipment and just everything that we have access to today, I think it's important to understand where theater started and how it was done and how far we've come from the beginning of time to now. Because I think the more we learn about how theater's changed throughout the course of time, it really causes us to see how lucky we are today. Because, I mean, we have so many things at our availability, at the touch of our fingertips. And for myself personally, as a theater performance major, performance is my passion, but I also really enjoy teaching, and I think that theater history is important for me to know if I ever do teach, so I can effectively answer questions that anyone might have. And at the end of the day, I just feel like we are living in history, and I think that the way things are going, we might be in a new golden age of theater, because we just have so many resources available that are really rapidly changing. Even making this podcast right now, like 10 years ago, I don't think it would have been as big of a deal as it is now. And I mean, it's become a very commonplace thing.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, when we're done making this podcast, it might be a part of theater history.
That is so interesting and so much more complex and beautiful than my answer. Oh my gosh. Well,
what about you? I'm sure it is just as beautiful and complex.
I guess theater history has to do with me the same way regular history does, because I'm looking to have a future, like, in the industry. It's a reminder of what we've gone through to get to where we are today, and a warning not to repeat past actions, but, like, also an invitation to turn something old new, like, to revisit the past. And I think it's really funny how one of my favorite podcasts is a D&D podcast, because D&D is essentially a bunch of friends sitting around and telling a story together. And, like, isn't that how theater started? Like, spoken word. And it's just really interesting to me how theater history is coincidentally related to one of my favorite things in the world right now. And it's just very cool to think about.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love when we, like, make connections in theater to other things that we like. Mm-hmm. It's super cool.
Yeah. Well, that's been it. That's all of our podcast for today.
Yeah, so we had a great time learning about each other's interests and our experiences. Mm-hmm. Well, so thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. See you later.
This is Victoria
and Wes
signing off.